I'm excited to talk about something that has kind of been going through my mind for a little while already, and it was really like pushed to the forefront a couple of weeks ago when we had our neighborhood get-together. Once a summer, our neighbors on the road right in front of our place as well as the road behind our place, on those two roads, they get together and they plan an evening where there's homemade ice cream and all kinds of food and fellowship, and it's always a great time. It's a way of interacting with the neighbors, finding out who they are, what they do, and all those types of things. And so for us especially, it has been very helpful because Elsie and I both grew up northwest of Berlin and lived there, raised our family there for 35 years. And so we just moved down to this area here between Walnut Creek and Sugar Creek in 2010. So that area isn't as familiar for us. And so as I thought about that, I thought, well, you know, that also is true in the church. And as our church here at Light in the Valley is growing, I mean, we see it. Elsie and I, as you know, travel some, and it seems like every time that we come back home, we see faces that we haven't seen before. And I'm like, who are they? And I'll ask someone, who are they? And so it's really exciting, but the thing that I want to talk about this morning is going to help us, I believe, to assimilate all of these new people that are coming. And what I have discovered over the years is that, yes, the pastor plays a real key role. The teachers with the kids play a real key role. The worship team plays a real key role. But if people don't feel connected, it's easy to drift away. And what I want to talk about this morning is taken from Romans chapter 12 and verse number 13. Romans 12 and verse 13. Share with the saints in their needs, pursue hospitality. Pursue hospitality. That's my title for this morning. We're in this series of Did He Mean It When He Said? And so I'm asking you the question, did Paul mean it when he said, pursue hospitality? I believe, yes, it's true. So when I think of pursue, my mind goes back to when I had a beagle. For years, I would have beagles, and I'd buy them out in Millersburg from Horace Mitten, that has now long gone to meet his maker. And I bought registered beagles that were always good for chasing rabbits. And so many times I would go rabbit hunting, and in the early days, sometimes Elsie went along rabbit hunting, and yeah, she does have a gun. Our granddaughter has claimed that one, and our boys would go hunting, and when my beagle would open up, we'd jump a rabbit, and sometimes I wouldn't even shoot because I wanted to watch the beagle pursue the rabbit. And it required effort on the part of the beagle because the rabbit was trying to get away. And I sometimes would see a rabbit running up the one side of the fence row, and then he would stop. And the beagle would be coming, and as it would get close, all at once the rabbit would take off again, and the beagle would like start barking like crazy. And sometimes they would go up and just cross under the fence and come right straight back on the opposite side of where, and so the beagle would go all the way up and around. Pursue. Pursue requires effort. And I think that is what Paul is saying. It requires effort. The hospitality that we enjoyed last night at the gala was phenomenal. And it required a lot of effort on the part of many people. I was amazed. I stopped in there at the barn yesterday morning around 9:30, and things, I'm telling you, were in full swing already in the kitchen as well as in the barn part where they were like decorating and do. So what we enjoyed last night didn't just happen. It required somebody pursuing a dream so that this could happen. So Paul is saying here that we should pursue hospitality. So hospitality, and this is somebody's take on it. He says like this: Christian hospitality differs from social entertaining. Entertaining focuses on the host. The home must be spotless. The food must be well prepared, and it was last night, and abundant, and it was last night. The host must appear relaxed and good-natured. We've all been in places like that where it has been absolutely amazing. I know we have been. But here it says, hospitality, by contrast, focuses on the guest's needs, such as a place to stay, nourishing food, a listening ear, or just acceptance. It can happen in a messy home. I remember years ago, Pastor Joe, the former pastor here, told me a story of house parents they had at a place where he was helping to oversee. And he mentioned the lady's name, and he said, she has the most amazing gift of hospitality. He said, I have watched her, and he said, the guests always love being there because she makes them feel special, accepted, and loved. And he said, this is the thing that kind of runs counter to what we might think. He said, a lot of times things aren't all that neat and orderly. But people can feel like they can just be at home. They can relax and enjoy and have a great time. Hospitality focuses on the needs rather than on the host. And I know sometimes it's easy to lose sight of that, especially for the ladies, that if you have somebody coming to your home, you want everything. And I mean, there's hours and hours that go into cleaning the home and vacuuming the floors and wiping the dust and cleaning the toilets. And I mean, everything has to be just spotless. And I think sometimes if we have that mentality, it holds us back from really offering hospitality because it's just too intensive labor. So, in 1 Peter 4, 8 to 10, it reads like this. Above all, love each other deeply, because love covers over a multitude of sins. Offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others. In the Hebrew, the word hospitality, the root word for that derives from the Latin, and it simply means a host, a guest, or it can be a stranger. And I remember at our neighborhood get-together, I was speaking to one of the neighbors, and I'll have a story to tell you about her a little bit later. But she said she's actually writing a book on hospitality, and she said one of the things that she discovered is that the word hospitality is very closely linked to pursuing strangers. And I found it interesting as I was studying here that this is why. It's connected with that. In the English language, it refers to a host, to hospitality, or like hospice. I know that my mother and my father, when they were up here at Walnut Hills in the last week or two of their life, they had hospice care. Elsie's mom had hospice care, where they came in and gave special attention to the needs of my parents and Elsie's mom. That's part of this gift, hospitality. Hospice, or a hostel. Some of the places that you travel to overseas especially, they have like a hostel or a hotel. In the Greek, hospitality is the generosity and courtesy shown to those who are far from home and or associates of the person bestowing guest or friendship. And after the service here, Elsie and I are leaving for a little over a month, and we'll be traveling. Our first stop is we want to stop at Jerry and Rita's house tomorrow night in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And so they will be our hosts, and they're all excited about us coming. Some of you may remember them here from Light in the Valley years ago, and they've been wanting us to stop in, and it kind of worked on this trip to do that. And from there, we're going on to Albany, Oregon, and where we will be hosted. And one of the things that the pastor told me, he said we have kind of like an apartment in the basement, and he said, we want to take care of whatever needs you have, but we're not going to like smother you. If you want your own time, you can have your own time. You're welcome to come up and eat with us and all of that, but we want you to feel so at home that if you see something in the refrigerator, you help yourself. If you want to come up, you come up. If you want to hang out down there, that's okay. That is what hospitality is talking about. And in a little bit, we'll look at some examples from the early church. What is hospitality today in Christianity? Speaking biblically, this is what somebody said. Hospitality is treating strangers and friends alike. It is welcoming one another into our homes and lives. And one of the things that I have been sensitive about for not just since I've been studying this, but if I remember back when I was pastor here, if I saw new people starting to come and nobody would go to them and talk to them after the service, I thought I had to do something about it. Because I always felt like if somebody is they're not connected and they will not feel loved or appreciated. And let me give you an example of what I'm talking about that I observed last evening. And it's not just because I had been working on this message, but there was a gentleman that was sitting by himself at a table, and nobody was, the people were grouping off, but he was just alone. So we still had room for one at our table, so I invited him over to our table, and he came and sat with us. Then a little bit later, as I was looking around, and I actually don't know who they are, I saw two guys sitting all alone at a table. It bothered me the whole evening that nobody somehow either invited them to sit with them, or maybe we should have just left our table that I had invited the guy to. I almost did. I just felt like, oh my goodness, they've seen all of these people enjoying themselves around the table, and here they're all by themselves. And so our church, to each other, we have a lot of strangers here. Some of us that have been here for a long time, one or two people come, and it's really easy. Oh, yeah, I remember them. But for those coming in, there's 200 faces. They don't have any idea who you are. And so I think what Paul is saying is, pursue strangers. And yes, it can be strangers in your church. So it seems like with our statement in the back, loving God, loving people, and impacting the world, as well as what Jesus was talking about with making disciples, it goes hand in hand, because when people feel connected, when they feel loved and appreciated, it just resonates with them. An example from the outside the church life is I seen last summer when New Camp had their camp out down at Winklepleck, that I follow one of those Facebook groups where they have all those teardrop campers and stuff in, and they're a pretty tight-knit, close community. And I saw a post on there that someone was offering their driveway, their place, for anyone that's traveling to UCamp for the camp out. And if you need a place to hook up for a day or two as you're traveling, stop at our place. And I was wondering in my mind how that all went. And recently I was stopped in at New Camp, and then I was talking to Brenda, Kennard Brenda, and she was telling me about this group, and then she said, and she said last summer in UCamp's camp out, there was a lady that had opened her place up for people she didn't even know that would be coming to this camp out. And there were several people that took her up on it. And she said, that lady talked to me about that, and she said, one or two of the couples that were there and camping at their place, it was the first time they met. They were hanging out together the whole week at UCamp, and they said they became the absolutely best friends. Strangers, because she was pursuing a stranger, and they became best friends. I remember also, there's another Facebook post of Kathy Raber, and I don't know if she's here this morning or not. Randy and Kathy, are you here today? Yeah, they're pointing back there. Okay. I'm not quite sure. It's been like within the last year. Several times already, I've seen Kathy post on Facebook to the effect that, hey, anybody want to stop in for coffee this morning? You just want to talk and hang out? I'll have the coffee ready. That's pursuing hospitality. Pursuing hospitality is not just waiting for an opportunity to come to you. Pursuing it is putting yourself out there, like the lady that has that teardrop camper, and she's pursuing hospitality. She put the offer out there. If you're traveling, stop at our place. We'll host you for a few days. In Luke chapter 7, I want to read a few verses, and where it demonstrates Simon the Pharisee demonstrated what hospitality is not, and the sinful woman, the sinner, demonstrated what hospitality was. In Luke chapter 7, I'm going to begin reading in verse 36, and I'm just going to read down through here, through verse 48. Then one of the Pharisees invited him to eat with him. He entered the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. And a woman in the town who was a sinner found out that Jesus was reclining at the table in the Pharisee's house. She brought an alabaster jar of perfume and stood behind him at his feet, weeping, and began to wash his feet with her tears. She wiped his feet with her hair, kissing them and anointing them with the perfume. When the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, "This man, if he were a prophet, would know who and what kind of woman this is who is touching him. She's a sinner." Jesus replied to him, "Simon, I have something to say to you." He said, "Say it, teacher." A creditor had 2 debtors. One owed 500 denarii and the other 50. Since they could not pay it back, he graciously forgave them both. So which of them will love him more? Simon answered, "I suppose the one who he forgave more." "You have judged correctly," he told him. Turning to the woman, he said to Simon, "Do you see this woman? I entered your house. You gave me no water for my feet, but she, with her tears, has washed my feet and wiped them with her hair. You gave me no kiss, but she hasn't stopped kissing my feet since I came in. You didn't anoint my head with olive oil, but she has anointed my feet with perfume. Therefore I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven. That's why she loved so much. But the one who is forgiven little loves little." Then he said to her, "Your sins are forgiven." I believe, in a nutshell, in that culture, they wore sandals. Their feet got dusty, they got dirty, and so it was the common courtesy when you entered a home that one of the servants would wash your feet. They would cater to you. You would get embraced. "Hey, we're glad that you're here." But Simon, although he offered his home to Jesus, he didn't provide the common courtesy, and Jesus picked up on that. He felt that. He felt that Simon was trying to portray the image of, "Yeah, I'm a good host, and yeah, I invited Jesus to my place." But he kind of like snuffed him when he got there. But this lady that was known in town to be a sinner, when she came, she realized how special that he was, and she was weeping. She took the oil, she wiped his feet with her hair from her tears. She put oil on them, anointing them with, and different commentators say that they would use like a perfumed, scented type of oil so that the person would smell really good. Simon had done none of those things. And yet, the sinner gave the example. When Jesus sent out the 12 in Luke chapter 9, verses 1 to 6, and in chapter 10, 1 to 7, he sent out the 12, and then he sent out the 72. And he told each of them that they should go to the next town, stay in the house where you're invited, and stay there until you're ready to go on to the next town. So hospitality in the early church community was a big deal. It was something that they practiced literally all the time. If you read some of the Old Testament stories, remember how the different people would come and they would be invited into their home. And Lot invited those visitors into his home. And then the guys, when they came, they wanted him to let these strangers out because they wanted to have sex with them. You remember the story. I didn't write the reference down. But in that culture, the guest was treated as if he was the president or something. And when they entered your home, you were completely responsible for their safety. And that's why Lot was expressing the way that he did. About, I don't know, within the last month, we had, when Elsie and I were on for host and hostess, we invited some people from church to come to our place for lunch. And it was a great time, actually. We had Leon and Sharon that were there, Mike and Carrie, Eli and Roxy, and Mike and Ezra. And Elsie and I referred to him as the two cowboys. Ezra is here. Ezra, just kind of wave your hand there. There you go. And I want to tell you a little something interesting about Ezra that we found out, because you see, when you have people that interact outside the walls of the church, you discover things that you don't find out here. And that's when you pursue strangers, you become acquainted. So now when I see Ezra, and I asked him if I can use him as an example, and he gave me permission. Ezra does something that's really cool. For some would think it's just play, but for him it's his work. It's how he makes his money. He rides horses and he trains horses, but more than that, he has 2 6-shooters. They're 45s, and what do you call the places? What's the official name? The rodeos, but he does these like, and I might not get all the terminology quite right here, but if you've been to Dolly Parton's Dixie Stampede, you know how they ride around there on the horses and they do all kinds of stuff with the horses. That's what he does in shows across the country. Ezra, right here from our church, except that he adds a little dimension to what he does. He has mastered this thing of standing on top of the horse, and he showed me a video clip of it. Hook up with him after the church at some Sunday and have him show the video. And then he pulls his 6-shooters out, and as the horses are going around, he has helium-filled balloons that are hanging up around the arena. And these 6-shooters don't have bullets in them. It's just gunpowder. And they're blanks. So when he goes around, he pulls his 6-shooter out and he shoots out the balloons. And there's this big blast and fire shoots out. And so it's a big hit. This guy from our church does this. You don't find stuff like that out on a Sunday morning. Are you getting the picture? When you open your home, when you go outside the walls of the church, when you pursue hospitality, he was a stranger to me. You discover things about people. I remember Eli, right down here. You've heard Eli talk about the fact. 10:43, okay. You've heard Eli talk about the fact that one of the things that got him connected here at our church was when he was invited to somebody's house for lunch. And he discovered how they do things. They would ask their kids to pray for the meal. And all of this stuff was foreign. And he felt connected. That's what I'm telling you. For our church to continue to grow, and I want it to grow, we have to move beyond the formality of Sunday morning and connect with people on an individual basis, because when they feel connected, there is a drawing card there. I want to be a part of that. And it's connected to hospitality. And it's not necessarily for mom to make the big meal. But we live in a culture where, and I'm just as guilty of this as the next person, I love my phone. If we're not careful, we allow this to take place, the place of verbally, face-to-face connecting with people. I remember the times when you would see the neighbors sit on the front porch, and you could just stop by. Now, somebody just remarked to me recently, and I thought, wow, that's very true. If families do hang out, it's on the back porch, so nobody sees them. We have become increasingly a closed-off society. Long ago, we didn't used to have garages to park our cars in. Now we have garages. We hit the button, the garage door goes up, we drive inside, our house is air-conditioned, the windows are closed. We have our own little sanctuary. And we don't interact with people. So when the Bible is speaking about hospitality, it focuses on the guest and not the hostess. The example in Matthew 25, I'm not going to take the time to read it. In Matthew chapter 25, where it talks about the sheep and the goats. And then the righteous was like, well, when did we do all of this stuff to you? And then Jesus said this: whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did to me. He goes on to say in Matthew chapter 10 and verse 42, and whoever gives even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones because he's a disciple, truly I tell you, he will never lose his reward. In Acts 16, 14 and 15, a God-fearing woman named Lydia, a dealer in purple cloth from the city of Thyatira, was listening. The Lord opened her heart to respond to what Paul was saying. After she and her household were baptized, she urged us, if you consider me a believer in the Lord, come and stay at my house. And she persuaded us. Acts 2 and 46, this is in the early church here. It says, they broke bread from house to house. They ate their food with joyful and sincere hearts, And in 1 Corinthians 16 and verse 19, the churches of Asia send you greetings. Aquila and Priscilla send you greetings warmly in the Lord, along with the church that meets in their house. I told you about our neighborhood get-together, and I want to finish up with this story. Some of you like to hang out at Rebecca's Bistro up here in Walnut Creek. This story is about Rebecca. And I called her the other day and I said, Rebecca, that story you told me about the lady you met in the airport, can I share your story? And she said, absolutely, you can share my story. So, she was flying to Guatemala. This happened now almost exactly a year ago. And she had a layover in Miami. And while she was in the airport, she had about a 2.5-hour layover. She said, I was on my phone and doing what we do on our phones. And there was a lady sitting beside me, and she was also on her phone. And she said, I felt very much like I was supposed to put my phone down. And so she said, I did. She said, I put my phone down, just kind of looking around at all the people going. She said, about that same time, the lady right beside me put her phone down. And we started chit-chatting. And the lady said, her name was Tammy. She was from Houston, Texas. And she said, Rebecca asked her what she does, and she said, well, she said, I'm starting a food business, and she said, I have my first catering job in a week from now. And she looked at Rebecca, and she said, do you know anything about food? And Rebecca said, well, actually, I own a restaurant. So she said, yeah, I know a little bit about food. And so they started talking about food. And this African-American lady, she said she had tattoos all over her body, at least that she could see. And she said it was this unlikely mix of Rebecca, our next-door neighbor, and this Tammy. She said, I'm from the hood in Houston, Texas. And they started conversing, talked almost nonstop the whole time till they had to get on their planes and leave. They exchanged phone numbers, and she said, I got to Guatemala, and she said, before I came home, I had gotten 37 messages from this lady. And she said on Monday morning, when her first banquet was that coming Friday or Saturday night, she said, I called her. And she said, I literally, day by day, walked Tammy through what she had to do and prepare, including recipes for that catering job that she was to do that weekend. And she said, in the night, after the night of the banquet, I get a text message from Tammy. And she said, and this is exactly what she said, we did it. We, as in Rebecca and Tammy together, did that catering job. And it all started because Rebecca was pursuing a stranger. And the story doesn't end there. They continued to stay in touch. And just this past August, just several weeks before we had our neighborhood get-together, they bought Tammy. She kept saying how she wants to come and visit where Rebecca's from. And so they ended up buying her an airline ticket so she could come and visit. She gets here. The first weekend that she's here is when that shooting was in Houston, Texas, at the Walmart. And she was all worried. She said, I have to call my sons, not because she was afraid they got shot, because she was afraid they were the shooters. This is real life for her. She was here that week, and she was just totally blown away. She said, I don't feel racial discrimination here. She said, you people are so kind and accepting. They took her along to their small group, where their small group met. And by the way, here's a plug for our impact groups. I know Elsie and I are going to sign up. And we want to be a part of that. And I trust every one of you will sign up for those. She said, I didn't know a place existed on earth like this. What you and I experience every day. Pursue strangers. And that stranger might be right here. They're continuing to stay in contact. She'll be coming back some more. I want to meet Tammy someday. The worship team could make their way up. And please don't forget Pastor Jimmy's birthday. We have to show him a little love on his birthday. And as you think about it, pray for us. As we'll be traveling, we'll be traveling, have meetings in Albany, Oregon. From there, we travel down to Phoenix, Arizona. From there, several churches in Texas. And so, then Oklahoma and home. So, God bless you all. Father, I pray.